the International Soccer Preview. We are Soccer Files Canada. Welcome to our continuation of Series 19. This one looking at the players of the 2023 Asian Cup, due to be played in January 2024. This episode is looking at the players of Palestine. Here we go. Hello and welcome to the International Soccer Preview by Soccer Files Canada. I'm Kevin and this is Series 19 on the players of the 2023 Asian Cup, played in 2024. This episode covers Palestine's players. We're doing this mediacast in two parts. Part one is looking at the candidates for the squad and their likelihood of making it. We think we went into too much detail in previous player mediacasts we've done, so we're aiming for a lighter, more listener-friendly version this time. Part two will come out when the squad lists are released and the final squad is selected. We think that'll be in late December or early January. At that time, we'll go over the list that we compiled this time and see who made it and who didn't. We will also cover things like injuries, surprise selections, but we'll talk about that more at the end. And we have made a separate video on what we'll be covering over the next 9 months. YouTube watchers can see the link to that on the screen, and it can also be found in the show notes for both watchers and listeners. In short, we're focused on the Asian and African Cups, with both taking place in early 2024. And we've also started our coverage of the World Cup 2026 qualifying. So this episode will have 3 sections. In section 1, we're going to give and discuss some general information on the team. Section 2 is the main part, where we look at the candidates in each position and their likelihood of making it. And section 3, we give any closing thoughts and preview part 2 in more detail. All right, let's begin then. So section 1 is some general information on the squad. And we start with just a couple of observations here. The first one is about recent, excuse me. Okay, sorry about that. Recent new or returning players. So we found it a bit difficult to determine the likelihood of some of the players we're going to present, because some new players were brought in, or players that had been on the team brought back after an absence. And we saw these especially in the September games. There were actually no October games for Palestine, as we'll see soon. So that also means that some of the players who had been fairly regularly selected and starting were not selected for the September games. So it leads to a bit of confusion. And I'm anxious to look at the November games to see, you know, what the situation is with the squad. The other thing too is, while most teams played about 20 games over the past 2 years, Palestine only played 8 games. So we don't have a lot of information or a lot of data to go on there. And finally, I'm sure we all know of the political situation in Palestine right now. Even before that, they were playing their games, their home games, outside of outside of Palestine, usually in Saudi Arabia or in Qatar. It's hard to say, though, how the recent political situation will affect the team. And some of the players do have Israeli connections, either being born there or playing for clubs there. So I'm feeling sad for the difficulty they must be facing right now. Anyway, whether the civil situation will affect whether they play games or not remains to be seen. We're doing this in late October, so we have some games coming up in November, and we'll have to see how that sorts itself out. Let's move on to the next section, and we talk about any significant retirements from the squad. So we do have a couple of players to mention. The first one is Abdellatif Badari. So Abdellatif Badari was the captain. He played with the team from 2007 to 21. So a fairly recent retirement, a couple of years ago. He had 82 caps and 8 goals for the team. And as I said, the captain during the Asian Cup in 2019. So he last appeared for the national team. I have June 2022 here, so perhaps he was on the bench even after playing his last game in 2021. Anyway, even that was a year and a half ago almost, so we don't expect to see him called up to the squad. He's 39 years old. The other one is Abdullah Jabbar, or perhaps it should be pronounced Jabbar. Last played for the team in 2019, but actually late in the year, in November 2019. So the Asian Cup that year was in January, so he did play on with the team for almost a year there. But again, we don't expect him to return despite that he's still at playing age. Okay, let us look at club affiliations for Palestine. So about half of their players play domestically, and about half of them play outside the country. So let's look at the main domestic clubs that the players are coming from. And by far the most common one is Hilal Al-Quds. And then to a lesser degree, these two teams, Jabal Al-Mukabar and Marquez Balata, seem to be the clubs most represented on the national team there. Those playing outside of the country, about half of them do, and really with a big variety of countries. So I can't name them all because there's probably about 15 different countries represented, and actually no country kind of represented predominantly. So we do have 2 playing for small clubs in Sweden, and they play anywhere. We have one from Chile, one from Indonesia, and another from Thailand, one in Switzerland. A few of them do play in Israel, so I suppose that's the country most represented there. So we have 4 players from with Israeli clubs, and then a couple of clubs in the UAE or the Middle East, the countries like Bahrain or Kuwait. Okay, and then there are no really big names. I would say Charleroi in Belgium, which is not a big club, but that's probably the biggest club outside of the country. Okay, let's take a look at their recent games. And as we said, just 8 games to look at here. Some teams played games in early 2022, but not Palestine. Their first games were in June, 3 games in June 2022, and those were qualifiers for this Asian Cup. The teams they played were Mongolia, Yemen, and Philippines there. And again, most teams had friendlies in September and October, especially of 2022, and November, but none for Palestine during that period. And in 2023, they did play some friendlies. All of them were played away or were away games. Again, home games are played outside the country as well. But in March, they played 1 game, and that was against Bahrain. And then in June 2023, they played 2 games. That was Indonesia and China. And in September 2023, they played Oman and Vietnam, 2 games. So those are the 8 games they've had over the past 2 years. And that's what we look at when we consider the players' participation. We look at how much they've participated over the last 2 years. Okay, and then significantly no games in October 2023, which is our most recent information for for most teams, but we don't have that for Palestine. So September 2023 is our most recent information there. Okay, next we look at formations, and really it's a real mix and match. There's hardly a pattern for Palestine, but I will say generally they do have 4 at the back, but recently they've played a couple of games with 5 at the back, a 5-1 formation, and I wonder if that will be what they do in the Asian Cup, since they're playing kind of tougher teams. Maybe they're practicing with 5 at the back, because in 3 of their last 4 games they've used 5 at the back. Otherwise, though, over the past 2 years, it's been 4 at the back. The midfield is generally 4 or 5 players, but it's often separated into 2 lines. So even if it's a 4-3-3, there may actually be kind of 1 defensive midfielder and 2 midfielders further upfield, or a 5-4-1. One of the 5-4-1s was definitely like 5 at the back, but then 2 lines of 5-2-2-1, 2 lines of midfield, each with 2 players. So we do often see that, but a bit of a mix and match there. They've even used a diamond formation, which is ostensibly a 4-4-2, but in fact is a 4-1-2-1-2. So 3 lines of midfield there against the Philippines in June 2022. So when we try to pin down to recent formations, as I said, the 5 at the back has been the most common recently, and then a 4-2-2 or some variation of a 4-2-2, for example, like a 4-2-2 and then 2. So forward line can be anywhere between either 1 or 2 forwards, and they did use a 4-3-3 in the first 2 games there of the Asian qualifiers, but haven't used it since. Okay, and finally in this section, the upcoming games. So they have 2 World Cup qualifiers coming up in November. And those will be Lebanon away, so not far away from where they are, and then Australia at home. That is a home game, but they'll be playing it in Kuwait there. So we expect that they'll be using their best players in those 2 games, and looking at the squad will shed some light, and we will be updating that in part 2 of the mediacast here. And so far there are no pre-tournament friendlies here that they have scheduled, but they might schedule a couple. Most teams don't have any scheduled so far, so I'll say none yet, because I wouldn't be surprised if they schedule a few. Okay, that brings us to the end of part 1, and we move on to part 2, where we start looking at the candidates. But before looking at the players, we're going to look at the managers. So just just to kind of create the narrative here, the outgoing manager is Nuruddin Ould Ali. So he was their manager from 2018 to 2021. So he took them through the Asian Cup in 2019 and stayed on for a couple of years after. But there's not much more to say about him, because the new manager has been in the position since 2021. So the new manager, or the current manager, is I'll just put Nuruddin Ould Ali in red. New manager is Makran Daboub. So I'll just say that when you see a player's name on the graphics here in gray, like Makran Daboub, it means they've never taken part in a tournament. If it's in black, like Nuruddin Ould Ali, then it indicates they've been through a tournament. So Palestine national team since 2021. He is Tunisian, and this is the only job he's had, Palestine national team coach. Well, he did coach the under-16 team from 2019, and he was the interim coach before getting the job permanently in May 2021, but he doesn't have any experience beyond that. He was a professional player in Tunisia from 1989 to 2008, but he didn't earn any international caps. He was a goalkeeper. Okay, that is the manager leading them through the tournament, and we move on to goalkeepers. So we'll start just by listing the names, and then we'll give a bit of biographical information on the players, especially the main candidates, and then we'll do a little summary, which is a bit of a narrative as to how the position has played out over the past 2 years. So we have a definite candidate in Rami Hamadeh, and then we have 4 possible candidates. So no likely candidates, but 4 possible ones. The first is Naim Abu Akar. The second is Bara Karoub, and then Amr Kadura, and finally Tawfiq Ali. And there you can see which ones were in the 2019 Cup if you're watching on YouTube, because those last 2 names are in black, so that means they've been in a tournament. So Rami Hamadeh has been with Palestine since 2013, and he has 42 caps and is 29 years old, and he was part of the squad in the 2015 Asian Cup, but just a bench player there, and he was a starter in the 2019 Asian Cup. So he'll pretty much certain to be the starter in this one too, because he has started all 8 of their games over the past 2 years. So Rami Hamadeh, a definite to be brought to the tournament and probably a starter as well. But who his backups will be is what we'll turn our attention to next, because we have 4 candidates. Naim Abu Bakar doesn't have any caps for the national team, but he was on the bench for 5 of the games over the past 2 years, including the last 3, and just 3 matches that he wasn't selected for. So I'm trying to order these in kind of order of our expectations. So because he was more recent than the other ones, we think he has the best chance. They'll probably bring 2 of these, by the way. Next one is Bara Karoub, also with no chances, and he's the youngest of this group at 25 years old. He got his first appearance on the bench in June 2023, and was on the bench for all 4 of the matches since then. So we think he's a good candidate too. The 2 who were backups in the Asian Cup 2019 seem a bit less likely. The first is Amr Kadura, and he's been with the team since 2019, although he didn't get his first cap until 2021. Now he has 3 caps. He plays for a small team in Sweden, Landskrona. He was born in Sweden, actually, and again on the bench for the 2019 Asian Cup. But since then, he's been on the bench for only 2 matches. However, one of them was the last match there in September. So kind of confusing us, really, because he seemed to be kind of fading out and then returned for the last match. And then the last one is actually a veteran, Ali Tawfiq, since 2011. He has 42 caps and is 33 years old. And he was part of the Asian Cup in 2015. He actually was not the starting keeper, but he did play in game 3 there, and then he was on the bench for the 2019 Asian Cup, and he was on the bench for 4 of their 8 games over the past 2 years, however not for the last 3 matches. So make of it what you will. So we'll finish with a kind of a narrative on the position. So Hamadeh is undoubtedly the starter, but the question is which of the four candidates will be brought as backup. So all of them have a claim. We're placing most emphasis on recent appearances, but even that is a bit hard to define. I would say of the four, Tawfiq currently seems the least likely, and his age, 33 years old, probably a strike against him, as they'll probably want to develop, backups for Rami Hamadeh down the road. Okay, that is the situation with goalkeepers, and we move on to defenders. And we'll start with central defenders and begin by introducing the candidates. So first one is Michel Termanini as a possible candidate. And next is Mohamed Salah or Mohamed Saleh as a possible candidate. And I'm sorry, I made a mistake. Michel Termanini is a likely candidate. Mohamed Saleh as a possible candidate. Also, Ahmed Magna as a possible candidate. And finally, Mahdi Isa, a possible candidate. We have a couple of, we have one candidate who's possible but unlikely. His name is Bashar Al-Shobaki. He was new and on the bench for one game in June of 2023, but not selected since then. So we'll leave his name off the list and bring it back if he is named to the final squad, but we think that's unlikely. We also have, as a very outside chance, the retired player we mentioned, Abdel Latif Badari, but again, we really doubt he would come back into the team. However, this is not a lot of central defenders, and usually they bring around 5 or 6. So perhaps there is a chance for those two players. Anyway, let's go back to introducing them. And oh my goodness, I forgot our definite player here. So we do have 5. The definite player is Yasser Hamed. And let's begin by talking about him. So Yasser Hamed has been with the team since 2019. He has 26 caps and 5 goals. I think 3 of them are recent, making him, I believe he's the highest scorer recently, or the second top scorer in World Cup 2022 qualifying. So Yasser Hamed was born in Spain and currently plays for Northeast United in India. And he has played in Spain as well. He was with Athletic Bilbao Youth Club in Spain, but the actual clubs he played for were much smaller than that. Over the past 2 years, he has started 7 of their 8 games and subbed in for 1 other. So we consider Yasser Hamed a definite candidate for the squad in the Asian Cup. Next, we have Michel Termanini, and he is possible. He is likely. I don't know what's wrong with my head today. Michel Termanini was born in Sweden and played for a few clubs in Sweden. Now he plays in Kuwait. So he's kind of been all over the Middle East. He has been with Palestine since 2018, but just 7 caps and 1 goal. And he wasn't part of the Asian Cup squad there in 2019. In fact, he returned to the team after a more than 5-year absence in March of 2023 and started 4 of their remaining 5 games and was on the bench for another. So we're going to see a few players like this who kind of returned to the squad over the last year. And it's a bit difficult to say what his chances really are, having been off the squad for 5 years and then suddenly coming in for the last 5 games. And keep in mind, there was no manager change to kind of explain this sudden return to him. Anyway, we're putting him at the likely level here, given that participation. And next we have Ahmed Magna. And Ahmed Magna got his first appearance on the bench in September 2023. and started one of their two remaining games and was on the bench for the other. So brand new to the squad, and he plays his club soccer in Israel, and he actually was the central defender in a three-man back line. So we saw they were experimenting with a five-man defensive line in the last couple of games there. So he was the central defender. So in the middle of the three central defenders there for that game. So just the one game for Ahmed Magna. So a possible candidate. And finally, Mahdi Isa. He has no caps for the national team. He got his first appearance on the bench in June of 2023 and was on the bench for two games, but then not called in for the 2 September matches. So doesn't look that likely, but we do have him as a possible candidate. And let's finish by summarizing the position. So Yasser Hamid and Mohamed Saleh played as partners for most of the period. And then Termanini came in increasingly, and Mohamed Saleh didn't play the last two. Now, part of the reason for this might be that Mohamed Saleh is unattached to a club since July. So often when that happens, because their fitness level goes down, they're not selected. So perhaps that's the reason he didn't play for the last two, opening the door a bit more for Termanini. And then I mentioned the last game, Magna came in against Vietnam, where they made it a five-man defense. So I'm also thinking that they may be preparing that five-man defense for the stronger teams they'll be facing in the Asian Cup. In that case, Magna might get a few more starts. As it is, he just has the one start. Okay, let us move on to the left-back position. And actually, we have two definite candidates here, so we'll sort that out for you. The first definite candidate is Samer Jundi. His name is also spelled Jondi as well as Jundi, so I'm kind of trying to get between the middle there. Samir Jundi. And the other definite candidate is Mohamed Khalil. And we'll talk about him because he's coded as a central defender. Next, we have a possible candidate in Camilo Saldana. And then we have two candidates whose names I'll just mention at possible but unlikely level. The first is Wajdi Naban, and he got an appearance on the bench in March 2023, but wasn't selected afterwards. And Musaf Yousafin, that is Mohamed Yousafin, similarly got two appearances on the bench in March 2023, but wasn't called in after that. So again, we'll add them back into the list if necessary. And here also, as a player seemingly off the squad, Abdullah Jabbar or Jabbar, and again, last played for the national team in 2019, but is only 30 years old. So I think there's a higher possibility of him coming back in. We introduced him as one of the retired players. Anyway, we're going to focus on the three names that do make our list here. So Samer Jundi was with the team since 2022. So he only has 7 caps. However, over the past 2 years, those 7 caps are over the past 2 years, and then he was on the bench for the last match. So he was consistently called up and actually fairly consistently starting, but a bit of doubt introduced by him being on the bench for the last match. But we nevertheless have him as a definite candidate. The other definite candidate is Mohamed Khalil. And as I said, he's coded as a central defender, but we moved him for this media cast because recently his only 2 starts have been as a left back. He was called up for all 8 matches, but only started 2 of them and was on the bench for 6 others. That's why we have him as a definite candidate. So it doesn't seem to be a starter as a central defender. If he starts recently, it's been as a left back, but we have him as a definite candidate because we strongly believe he'll make it to the squad. Finally, here we have Camilo Saldana. So Camilo Saldana was born in Chile, and there is a connection that Palestine has with Chile. In fact, one of the Chilean club teams is called Palestino, and we have had players with a Chilean background. So it's a diaspora of Palestinians living in Chile. And in fact, Camilo Saldani played for that club, Palestino, for 6 years. Now he's with Union San Felipe in Chile since 2023. And he got his first cap very recently too, in September. He didn't start either of those 2 games, but he was subbed in for both. And so we consider him a possible candidate here. Okay, so let's finish this section by summarizing the position. It was Samer Jundi for 6 games, and the central defender Mohamed Khalil for 2 matches, including the last one. So maybe Mohamed Khalil is the backup for this position, as well as being a backup for central defenders, because they didn't seem to have enough candidates there. Okay, moving on to right backs, we'll introduce the candidates. We have a definite candidate in Moussa Farawi and a likely candidate in Musab Al-Bathat. And just the 2 players here. And let's introduce Moussa Farawi. So he's been with the team since 2019 and has 4 caps. And in fact, started 4 of their 8 games over the past 2 years. So even though he first appeared on the bench in 2019, got his first cap, it seems, recently over the past 2 years. Started 4 games, subbed in for 1, and on the bench for 3 others. So consistently called up is Moussa Farawi, and so we have him as a definite candidate. The other one, the likely candidate, is Musab Al-Bathat. He's a veteran with the team since 2013 and has 54 caps. He plays for Cleopatra in Egypt and was part of the squad for the 2015 Asian Cup and the 2019 Asian Cup. He was a starter in both of those tournaments. Recently, though, over the past 2 years, he started 4 of their games, subbed in for 1, but not selected for 3 others. So that's why we move him down to likely due to those 3 non-selections. However, moving on to the summary, we do see that they are sharing the position. Farawi for 4 games and Al-Bathat for 4 games, including the last 2. So in terms of recency, he has the Al-Bathat has a slight advantage, but really it does seem like they share the position, and maybe that's what they'll do at the Asian Cup as well. Okay, we are finished with defense and we're moving on to midfield, and we're going to start with defensive midfielders. The fact is, as I said during the team information, they actually do use 2 lines of midfield more than a lot of teams. So they have one kind of midfielder more as a defensive midfielder, and then 2 I'm not going to say attacking midfielders, because usually ahead of them there are 3 attacking players. So we'll say central and defensive midfielders. However, there doesn't seem to be a lot of how can I say, attention given to whether it's a player coded as a defensive midfielder playing in that role. In other words, all of them will participate somewhere in the middle of the midfield without much distinction between who's coded as a defensive and central. Okay, let's get on with it. And I'm going to start with the player kind of who seems to be off the squad, but was a reasonably big name. He was a starter in the 2019 Asian Cup, and that is Mohamed Darwish. So we're going to put him on the seems to be off the squad, because I wouldn't be that surprised to see him back. I won't dwell on him a lot, other than to say that he was on the team since 2015 and had 29 caps and was a starter in the Asian Cup. He also last appeared for the team in June 2022, so that's not that long ago. And he's 32 years old, so he's not that old. So I wouldn't be shocked to see him coming back into the team. Okay, let's go to our main candidates, though, and we have three at the definite level. First one is Mohamed Yamin, and then we have Mohamed Rashid, or Mohamed Basim Rashid. Initially, I had him called as Mohamed Basim, but recently I've seen Mohamed Rashid. And then we have Ode Karub, also at the definite level, and we even have one at the likely level, Atta Jabbar, or Atta Jabber. So let's go back over these players, and we'll see how they all fit into the midfield here. Mohamed Yamin has been with the team since 2016 with 39 caps and 3 goals. It was a surprise that he wasn't included in the 2019 Asian Cup squad, but over the past 2 years, he started 6 of their 8 games and subbed in for 2 others. So he's always called up Mohamed Yamin, and usually as a starter. Next, Mohamed Rashid, also a definite candidate. He's been with the team since 2018 with 35 caps and 2 goals. He plays for Bali United in Indonesia since 2023, but he's also played for Smuha, which is a fairly big club in Egypt. And he also played for St. Francis University team in the United States. He was born in Palestine, but seems to have some kind of a connection with the USA there. He was part of the squad, Mohamed Rashid, in the 2019 Asian Cup. He wasn't actually even on the bench for game 1, but he subbed into game 2 and then started game 3. So hard to say if he was a starter there or not, but nevertheless had some field time. Over the past 2 years, he started 6 of their 8 games and subbed in for 1 and was on the bench for 1. The one he was on the bench for was the last match. So we're going to see, again, a bit of that confusion over the last couple of games for Palestine. So Mohamed Rashid seemed to be a starter, but now we have a bit of doubt on that. He did score 2 of their 10 goals in qualifying for this cup. So he, despite being coded as a defensive midfielder, does put the ball in the net sometimes, only recently actually. Okay, the third definite candidate is Ode Karub. And Ode Karub been with the team since 2017 with 23 caps. So his profile looks quite similar to the other ones. The difference being that he, like Mohamed Yamin, was not called up for the Asian Cup in 2019. Over the past 2 years, he started just one of their 8 games, but he was subbed in for 6 and on the bench for 1 other. So our coding here is based on whether we think they will make it to the Asian Cup squad, and he seems a definite candidate for doing that, but doesn't seem to be likely to be a starting player. So Ode Karub, a definite candidate but a substitute, and I'll actually say his only start there was as a central attacking midfielder, even though he's coded as a defensive midfielder. Next, we have one likely candidate, Atta Jabbar, and he plays for Neftchi Baku in Azerbaijan. So perhaps I should have put that among the bigger clubs, because it is one of the biggest clubs in Azerbaijan and I think they make it to the Champions League from time to time. Anyway, he's been with them since 2022. He was with Ashdod in Israel before that, and he was actually born in Israel, Atta Jabber. So I can't imagine what his situation is in the current political climate. It must be very awkward. Anyway, he got his first cap in June 2023 and started all 4 of their games since then. So really making his way into the team here is Atta Jabber. And even though he's very new to the squad, we consider him a likely candidate. And that's all we have here. So let me try to untangle this a bit. And before I do, I'm going to introduce the one central midfielder that we have, because those positions overlap. And we only have one central midfielder. I don't think I've had any team who have had as few central midfielders as that. And it's at the possible level. The player is Amid Sawafta. And he is new to the team since 2023 with 4 caps. He got his first appearance on the bench actually in 2021, but then was off the team for 21 months until he returned in March of 2023. But he didn't start any games. He subbed in for 4 and was on the bench for 1 other. Nevertheless, he was selected for the last 5 games, and we have him as a possible candidate, only as a substitute, though. Okay, now we can go back and kind of summarize the situation in the middle of the field. And there tended to be 3 central midfielders early on, and usually they were in a 1-2 formation. Sometimes the two playing ahead of the one were left wingers and right wingers, and they came in for what was really a left midfield and a right midfield position, because there are 3 attackers ahead of them playing. Nevertheless, wingers sometimes came in for the position. Mohamed Darwish was there for the first game, but has been off the team or kind of off the field since then. June 22 was their first game in 2022, so he's been off the team since then. So Darwish initially, and Yamin and Rashid were regularly there. So our 2 definite candidates, Mohamed Yamin and Mohamed Rashid, were there regularly. And then, as we said, Atta Jabber came in for the last 4. He didn't replace one of them. He replaced each of them twice. So it doesn't shed any light on who he's replacing. In fact, he just seems to be kind of backing them up. So currently, all 3 of them kind of playing in the central midfield. And recently, the central midfield has been 2 players rather than 3. So perhaps it'll be all 3 of them if they go back to one of those formations demanding 3 midfielders. Okay, let's move on. For left and right midfielders, we actually have no players coded that way, even though the formation they use does sometimes call for it. So as we said, it's either defensive midfielders or wingers coming in to play that position when they use that formation. And that brings us nicely to talk about the wingers. And we'll begin with the left wingers, where we have 3 possible candidates. The first one is Islam Batram. The second is Ala al-Din Hassan, sometimes just called Ala al-Din. And the third one is Ali Abu Alfa. So 3 possible candidates there. Also 1 possible but unlikely, who I'll just mention but not add to the list, and that's Samir Maruf. He's a Swedish-born player actually playing in Sweden, but he was called up in March 2023, then disappeared again. So we'll add him to the list if he appears on the final squad. Okay, let's look at the 3 possible candidates then. Islam Batram. Has been with the team since 2016 and has 25 caps and 5 goals. He's also unattached since July. Prior to that, he was with a team in Thailand. And to the national team, he returned after a 21-month absence in March of 2023. He started one of the remaining 5 games, and he was subbed in for 2, but not selected for the last 2 matches. And again, one wonders if that is because he's not playing for his club. Okay, the second possible candidate is Ala Al-Din Hassan, and he got his first cap in September 2023 and started both of those games then. So he has 2 caps for the national team. He's 23 years old, and he also plays in Israel. So with Hapoel Accra in Israel most recently. So Ala Al-Din Hassan, another possible candidate. And finally, Ali Abu Alfa also got his first cap in September 2023. So 2 new players brought in to this position, and then 1 player, Islam Batran, maybe out of the position because he doesn't have a club. Ali Abu Alfa started one of their remaining 2 games there, and he was subbed in for the other. So both of them got on the field there, and this is the situation on the left wing. In fact, it's a very unsettled position, the most unsettled position for Palestine. It's a different player almost every time, and mostly the left wing position is played by out of position players. So the forward, who we'll meet shortly, Chihade, has played the position twice, and right winger Warda, who we'll meet right away, has played it twice. But most of the time, we saw these 3 possible candidates have each played it once as well. Most of the time, it's a left attacking midfield or a left forward role. So actually, Warda only played it when it was a truly a left wing role there. Okay, so a lot of confusion on the left, but it's much more clear on the right, except for the fact that the player playing the right wing position, which is not often right wing, it's a right attacking midfielder or even right forward. The player playing that position mostly is actually a left winger, Tamer Siam. So we'll introduce him, Tamer Siam, as a definite candidate. And then the player I just mentioned, Mahmoud Abu Warda, is a likely candidate here too. So let's take a look at these players. Tamer Siam is one of the more experienced players on the squad since 2014 with 57 caps and 12 goals. And he also plays in Thailand, and he was a starter in the 2019 Asian Cup. Despite being with the team around the time of the 2015 Asian Cup, he wasn't selected, but was a starter in 2019. And started 7 of their 8 games over the past 2 years and was on the bench for the other. And we moved him from left wing because he primarily plays on the right as a right attacking midfielder or a right forward. He did play on the left a couple of times and kind of roves around the field a little bit, but over the past 2 years he appeared on the right side, right quadrant, the right upper quadrant of the field, we can say. He appeared there a bit more often. Okay, the likely candidate, Mahmoud Abu Warda, has been with the team since 2019, but has 27 caps and 3 goals. So he gets on the field quite often. And he wasn't part of the Asian Cup squad in 2019. He started 6 of their 8 games over the past 2 years, subbed in for 1 of those, and not selected for 1. But that one was the last match. So he's another of those players for whom we have a seed of doubt about because they weren't selected right at the end here. So as we mentioned, he is also a bit of a rover, but he plays a little bit more on the left side, even though he's coded as a right winger. And we said, especially when it is a truly winger role on the left, he tends to move over there. But again, a bit of worry that he wasn't selected for the last game. So let me just clarify this position. And basically, it is mostly Tamer Sayam playing on the right upper quadrant of the field. But sometimes we do see other players there, including Warda, who has played on the right one or two times. Okay, and finally, we move on to the forward line. I shouldn't say finally, because we include attacking midfielders in that category. So let's begin with attacking midfielder Jonathan Cantillana as a likely candidate, and Same Maraba as a possible candidate. Just two candidates here. Jonathan Cantillana has been with Palestine since 2015 and has 30 caps and a fairly impressive 10 goals there. And he is one of those players from the diaspora in Chile. They used to have more of them. Now they only seem to have a couple. So we speculated. In fact, I think I was told by a Palestinian student of mine that the Israeli travel restrictions does create some problems. So maybe that's why the number of Chilean players, Palestine players has gone down since 2019. Jonathan Cantillana himself may have had the same problems because he was absent from the team for 4 years and he returned in March 2023. Didn't start any games, but he was subbed in for 3 and not selected for 2. So he's kind of making a late comeback to the team. He was a starter in the Asian Cup in 2019. And then seemed to be off the team as most of the Chilean-based players were, but then made a comeback. He was one of the few who kind of made a comeback onto the team. He doesn't play in Chile right now. He plays for a Malaysian team. And actually has been in that part of the world since 2019, playing in Indonesia also. So again, played in the 2019 Asian Cup, off the team since then, but making a comeback. The likely player there is Same Maraba, and he has been with the team since 2015 with 43 caps and 12 goals. And he was also a starter no, not in the 2015 Asian Cup. He didn't make that squad, but in the 2019 Asian Cup, at least in game 1, he was a starter, but then he lost his starting position and didn't appear after that. He had been their top scorer in qualifying for the 2019 Asian Cup. But in the past 2 years, he was actually off the team for 12 months, returning in September 2023, so returning for their last 2 games, and was subbed in for 1 and on the bench for the other. So another player kind of making a late comeback into the team here, Same Maraba. So let me describe the situation for attacking midfielders. So they don't often use formations that call for this position, especially recently. When it is used, it's usually a defensive midfielder. So we saw that Ode Karoub's only start was as a central attacking midfielder. And honestly, I think the only other time the role has been called for, Mohamed Rashid played that role, and that was in one of the Asian Cup qualifying games back in June 2022. Against the Philippines. So not much call for these players, although they do. I mean, that's why they don't perhaps have a lot of starts here. These 2 players being used mostly as substitutes. Okay, there are no players coded as secondary strikers, so we move on to forwards, our last category. And here we have one likely candidate in Saleh Chihade, and one possible candidate in Mahmoud Wadi, and two possible candidates. The other is Ode Dabag. And then we have one possible but unlikely candidate. And I'll put him on the list because he was there in June of 2023. And that is Rebil Dahamshi. Uh, Rebuild the Hampshire. He was only on the bench for 2 games in June 2023, so we think he's unlikely. Let's go back and look at Saleh Chihade, our likely candidate. He's been with the team since 2018 with 14 caps and 2 goals. And he was not born in Switzerland, but moved to Switzerland when he was 7 years old. So he's been playing with Swiss teams, currently with a team called Kriens in Switzerland. I'm not familiar with that team. So they're pretty small teams that he's been playing for. But in terms of the national team for Palestine, he started 4 of their 8 games over the past 2 years and was subbed in for 3, but not selected for the last match. So again, a bit of a concern there. But we do consider him a likely candidate. In fact, he wasn't selected for the 7 games before 2022. So he's kind of been, he was kind of off the team and back over the last 2 years, just not for the last game. Okay, likely candidate, Saleh Chihade, and we move to look at our possible candidates. Mahmoud Wadi, we'll start with him. He has been with the team since 2017, but only 19 caps in that time. He was part of the Asian Cup 2019 squad. He was a substitute actually in game 1, but then gained a starting position for the following 2 games. And he plays for Pyramid in Egypt. Pyramids in Egypt. He's been with several Egyptian clubs, actually. And over the past 2 years, well, he returned after a 2.5-year absence in June of 2022. And so he has been, that does cover the 8 games over the past 2 years. He started 4 of them, was subbed in for 1 and on the bench for 1, and not selected for the last 2 matches. So again, a bit of a uncertainty as to his current position with the squad. That's Mahmoud Wadi. And finally, Ode Dabag. He is he's been with the team since 2018, 27 caps and 11 goals. So a main scorer for them, and probably plays for the biggest club among them. That's Charleroi in Belgium. He also played in Portugal too, and he was a sub in the 2019 Asian Cup. But in World Cup 2022, he was their top scorer with 4 of their 10 goals. So then it came as a surprise to me that he only started 2 of their 8 games over the last 2 years, subbed in for 1, and not selected for the rest of the matches, the last 5 matches. So for whatever reason that is, he's been off the team. I think we put him as possible here because of his performance in World Cup qualifying especially, and his club affiliation. I personally would be a bit surprised to see him not make the squad, but then I'm not familiar with all the ins and outs of the squad. Anyway, Ode Dabag, just a possible candidate here. So let's finish by summarizing the position. In the forward position, there's sometimes 1 slot and sometimes 2. So Ode was there for 2 of the first 3 games. So it seems like he held down the position kind of leading up to and at the beginning of the period we're talking about. But after 3 games, he was gone, and it was mostly the 2 players we mentioned, Wadi and Chihade. When Wadi does start, he usually is starting as a centre forward, whereas Chilade sometimes starts as a centre forward, but also, as we saw, starts as a left forward or even a left attacking midfielder. And then oddly, in the last match, it was left winger Aldin, Ala Aldin Hassan, lining up as the sole forward. So not really sure what was going on there. Okay, so that is it. We will move on to part 3 now, and with some closing thoughts. So again, so many players kind of brought in September, or else not selected in September, having been selected regularly before it, that it's a bit of a confusing situation for Palestine. Some of the positions seem quite nailed down, though, especially on defence. But we'll have to look at the November games to get a clearer picture of who it looks like they're going to bring to the Cup. At least we do know they'll probably be using their best players in November, probably with an eye to selecting their squad for the Asian Cup. Okay, let's finish with a quick preview of part 2 then. So we're going to go back over the list that we compiled in this podcast, or in this media cast. We're going to talk about any notable non-selections, so that would be likely or definite players who don't make the squad, and then any surprise inclusions, that would be any possible but unlikely, or players who are seemingly off the squad that do make the squad, and there are always a few of those. So a lot of those names we'll have to bring in. Maybe we mentioned them here and maybe we didn't. Also, there's always a couple of new players who are hot in their club form leading up to the Cup that the manager brings in. And finally, we'll give an update on injuries. We don't have any long-term injuries that we know about for the players now, so closer to the time we will look at those injuries and see if any players are off the team for that reason. All right, that brings us to the end. We originally planned to tag on our past, present and future plans for the mediacast, but we have instead decided to put a link to that 10-minute video in the show notes. It covers what we're working on and what we plan to do over the next 9 months. We'd like to thank Naber Avacham and Pixabay for the wonderful music you hear in this mediacast. The title is called Arabic Trap.